Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our thought for today. I hope you've had a good week so far. We're at Wednesday, halfway through. Of course, there's been a little bit of good news from the government yesterday about the possibility of churches starting up on the 4th of July. Just before you get too excited, there are lots of things we're going to need to think through. There's some disappointment in there for us, and there's some excitement as well. We need to work out how God wants us to make the easing of restrictions work for people. This week, during Thought for the Day, we've been thinking about covenants. Covenants are agreements where two parties enter in together and make promises to each other that they promise to keep. A covenant is a voluntary partnership between two people, and it's quite wonderful to know that since the fall of humanity in Genesis 3, God has entered in to 5 main covenants with his creation. And it really is a wonderful example of the character and the nature of God, that he would voluntarily enter into that sense of partnership with us as broken people, knowing our sin, knowing our tendency to rebel and turn against his word. And so God is a God who is gracious, who wants to partner with us, set us free from our sin and bring us back into that covenant relationship, that Genesis 1 and 2 perfect relationship. We've looked at the covenant he made with the world through Noah and his family after the flood. Yesterday we looked at that covenant with Abraham, where he promised to make him a great nation. From him all the families of the earth will be blessed. And today we're going to continue with number 3 on our list, which is referred to the covenant with Israel, or with Moses and Mount Sinai. So we're fast forwarded many years from this man Abraham who became Abraham. Israel, of course, grew and became 12 sons with their father, and they went off to slavery in Egypt. Sad, they went off to Egypt to escape a famine under Joseph, and then they had 400 odd years where they were slaves in Egypt to Pharaoh. And that terrible time but then God saw their suffering. He sent his servant Moses along with his sister Miriam and brother Aaron, and Moses led God's people out of Egypt. Slaves released from their slavery through the Red Sea parted before them, and they walk into the desert and they travel that journey to Mount Sinai. And it's here at Mount Sinai that this next covenant takes place. God meets them on top of the mountain. There's thunder and lightning. There's this real sense of the majestic, powerful presence of Yahweh, the King of Kings. And this covenant is about the revelation of God's character. He reveals to Moses and then the Israelites not just that he's there, but his name. He reveals his character. And then through the giving of the Mosaic law and the 10 commandments, God reveals over and over and over just who he is. This is a revelation of the character of God. But it's more than that, because God offers them a partnership. He offers this now nation that was once a family the opportunity to do something really quite unique, to become his people, the people of God. So this is kind of a covenant of grace in a way, because he set them free from slavery and brought them to that mountain to bring this covenant, this opportunity to be his people. So let me just read a few verses from Exodus chapter 19, so you know where we are. It says, "Then Moses went up to God," so they're at Sinai, "and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, 'This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites.' So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words of the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, 'We will do everything the Lord has said.' So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, 'I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so the people will hear me speaking with you, and that will always put their trust in you.' And then Moses told the Lord what the people has said, and the story unfolds. And it really is quite a dynamic moment. Remember, we said on that first week on Monday that these covenants are the backbone of the biblical story. And actually this covenant is very different to the first two. The first two was one-sided. The Abrahamic one was kind of very relational. God's given this great promise for the future, this that fulfills its culmination kind of in the part of the life of Israel, but completely in the life of Jesus, and we look forward to its further culmination his return with the new heavens and the new earth and every tribe and every tongue. So this one's quite different, because in this one, Israel, the sons, the family of Abraham, and now a nation, are given a really set of quite serious, somber, sobering responsibilities that are kind of temporary, summed up in the Ten Commandments. He gives them these promises, these stipulations of how to live. And it's quite different, it's quite serious, because God says to them, you're going to be my people, my treasured possession, a kingdom of priests. They have a very specific role. They're not just a nation whom God will just make all their dreams come true. No, it's quite the reverse. They're to follow him into a world that is sinful, and they're to be a light to the Jews and the Gentiles, Isaiah 49. They're to be a nation of priests. They're to be the way the world begins to make itself right with God. A very special job they have, which is to be his representatives, to be his people, to speak his words. They're to be uniquely different to the world. And so God gives them a very clear choice, that if they obey him, there'll be great blessings. If they disobey these agreed promises they've both made, there'll be curses, there'll be punishments. And of course, as the Old Testament unfolds, they often turn their back and break those covenant promises and pay the penalty within themselves as a community. And it's very sobering stuff. And in fact, a bit later on, God will say to them, you cannot do it. You will not be able to keep your end of the bargain. But they insist, no, we want to do it. And they make that agreement with God at Sinai. And so, of course, their history reflects those blessings at times and those punishments, those curses as well. And although this covenant is very serious, and it's God's way of making a unique nation that will be a light to a dark world, actually, again, we see the character and the nature of God. This is a holy God who is perfect, who can't be anywhere near sinful, rebellious, broken people. So there needs to be someone between us and God. And so God calls his people to be like a nation of priests, to stand in that gap. And we begin to see the prefiguring of the work and the ministry of Jesus Christ. He himself is our mediator. He himself is our Redeemer, standing before a holy God and a sinful people, taking our sin, being our perfect sacrifice. All the things that we see listed in the Mosaic law that happens in the temple, we see fulfilled in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And ultimately, Israel will be a huge failure from this covenant. They will break these covenant rules over and over and over, and will find themselves in exile, oppressed by enemies, because they just cannot keep it. And so there's a waiting and expectancy for a perfect Israelite who will come and be all that this covenant proposes. Jesus is that perfect Israelite. He keeps the law in its entirety. He obeys God fully. He does what Israel couldn't. He becomes the prophet, priest, and king. But this covenant shows us that this is a God who wants a broken world back, and the lengths he will go to do it. There's much more to think about, of course, but that's hopefully whetted your appetite. But God bless you. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.